If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will give a brief friendly reminder or simply mute the microphone. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board president reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. At the board's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the question and answer feature. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once unmuted, the member of the public may verbally state their comment. This is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board. Such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be answered. If any attendees utilize a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. While you are free to express criticism or negative views for the sake of the members of the public participating on the call, please do not use profane language when making public comments to the board. Thank you. And with that, I return the meeting or hand the meeting over to the board president.
Good morning, welcome, and thank you for your patience this morning. The time is 9:18, and today is Thursday, September 17th, 2020. This is a one-day meeting of the Physical Therapy Board of California. We are meeting at the Physical Therapy Board office located at 2005 Evergreen Street in Sacramento. May we please have roll call?
Alicia Rabena-Amen.
Here.
Katerina Ellaby.
Here.
Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Tanya McMillian. Tanya McMillian is absent. All members are present with the exception of Tanya McMillian, and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. And right to agenda item number 3, public comment on items not on the agenda. Moderator, will you please facilitate public comment?
I'm Ann. Tanya McMillan is present.
Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and at the board president's request, I will go ahead and open the question and answer feature. All right, the question and answer feature is now available. If you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you're not seeing the Q&A panel, please click on the question mark within a square at the bottom right of your screen, and we are displaying instructions for your reference. We'll give you a moment to access the feature. This is the moderator, and Madam President, I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And I'd like to remind the public that we will be taking public comment after each item on the agenda as well. Okay, and agenda item number 4, review and approval of the June 25th, 2020 minutes.
Madam Speaker, this is Daniel Drummer. Madam President.
Yes.
I would, before we begin, I would just like to be the one to read our mission for today.
You are so good to us. Thank you, Dr. Drummer. Please do so.
The mission of the Physical Therapy Board of California is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act.
Thank you very much. Okay, and on to agenda item number 4.
So the June 25th, 2020 draft meeting minutes begin on page 17 of the meeting materials. I will go ahead and go through page by page for any edits by the board. Were there any edits on page 17?
This is Daniel Drummer. I have a question about in line 22, Mr. Knutz is listed as a DCA legal counsel. Is he, and I just want a clarification, is he a PT board legal counsel, or is he DCA legal counsel just assigned to the board? Because the way that I read what's currently printed, it makes it sound like he's representing TCA.
Daniel, this is Michael Kanotes. I agree. I think we probably should say PTBC or physical or board legal counsel there. That's certainly my role when I'm advising you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Were there any other edits on page 17? Okay, moving on to page 18. Page 19. Page 20. Page 21.
This is Daniel Drummer. I have highlighted just in the paragraph starting in line 119 through 131, and where there were suggestions about additional meetings sometime in August, but I'm assuming we'll be discussing that topic at a later point, the sunset.
Yeah, we'll address sunset issues as part of the legislative report later in this meeting.
Thank you.
Were there any other edits on page 20? Moving on to page 21. '22. 23. 24. 25.
This is Daniel Drummer. Line 325, I believe Ms. Kalis's name is, there's a typo where it says Kalin. It should say Kalis.
Were there any other edits on page 25? Moving on to page 26. 27. 28. 29. 30. 31. 2. 33. 34. 35. Page 36. Page 37. And that concludes the draft meeting minutes for the June meeting.
Thank you, Brooke. I'd like to solicit board comment on the meeting minutes. In years past, we've had comments that perhaps they did not capture the spirit of some of the conversations, and then there was comment about maybe it being, overly wordy. So any feedback from the board regarding the minutes?
Hi, good morning. This is Katerina. I think the minutes look great. I think they're concise, they're easy to read, and I believe that they capture the conversation that we had.
Thank you, Ms. Ellaby. Dr. Dominguez?
I would agree with Ms. Ellaby. I think it's a nice balance of not too much detail, just enough.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve these minutes?
This is Jesus Dominguez. I move to approve the minutes with those tiny little amendments or sort of typo corrections. Mr. Knotes can help me out with the wording.
And I second Tanya McMillan.
And this is Michael. I think you did just fine with that.
Thank you, sir.
We have a motion from Dr. Dominguez to approve the minutes with the edits mentioned, and a second by Ms. McMillan. Any further board discussion? And moderator, will you please facilitate any public comment?
Thank you. This is the moderator, and at the request of the board president, I am now opening the question and answer panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you're not seeing the Q&A panel, go ahead and click on the question mark within the square at the bottom lower right of your screen, and we are displaying instructions for your reference. Madam President, I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so can we please have a roll call vote?
Alicia Rabena-Amen.
Aye.
Katerina Ellaby.
Aye.
Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Tanya McMillan.
Aye.
5-0, motion carries.
Thank you. And on to agenda item number 5, the President's report. We have the adopted 2020 meeting calendar. Are there any comments from board members on the meeting calendar? Any comments from staff?
Currently for the month of December, we still have December 10th and 11th blocked out on the calendar. I'd recommend keeping that just from kind of an optimistic perspective. As we get closer to it, we might end up doing the same thing that we've had to do for the last 2 meetings. And depending on the amount of board business that's on the agenda, we will change it to, again, a WebEx / COVID-19 meeting. And if there's not enough board business to take both days, then we will move it to just being the 10th if that pleases the board.
Any board comments?
Madam President, this is Daniel Drummer. The CPTA conference that's showing as October 3rd is actually October 3rd and 4th, both Saturday and Sunday. This year it's a virtual conference, but it will be 2 days.
Thank you. Okay, any other board comments? Okay, so since this is an adopted meeting calendar, we can move straight to the 2021 proposed meeting calendar. So if board members would please look at the 2021 meeting calendar, and I invite your comment. Okay, any staff comments?
This is Jason Kaiser, the executive officer. Typically, this calendar is pretty set in stone by this point of the year. I think, like many things on the agenda today that we'll be discussing, it too is affected by COVID-19 and the global pandemic. So I would propose leaving the dates as they are, and then we have it kind of as a play it as you go. And hopefully by March, we'll be able to conduct in-person meetings and see each other, again. But in the event that we can't, again, we'll edit that particular meeting and look at the amount of board business, whether it's a 1 day or a 2 day, and provide the electronic links well in advance.
Okay, and so this is a calendar that we will actually adopt at our December meeting. No action is required today, but I'd like to ask the moderator to please facilitate any public comment on either meeting calendar.
This is the moderator, and I have now opened up the Q&A panel. So if any members of the public would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we are displaying instructions for your reference.
Excuse me, this is James Sims, and I am not able to master the Q&A thing, but have a question or a comment to make. Hello?
This is the moderator, and since you're a panelist, that's why you're not seeing the Q&A.
That's what I thought.
Oh, you found, okay.
No, that's what I thought. I thought that maybe that was blocking me out from the Q&A.
Yes, okay. But I will defer to the board president on this. We don't have, we do have one request from the public for public comment at this time. So,
yes, I'd like to allow that.
okay, and I believe this public comment is just for this agenda item. It looks like they want to talk about future agenda items, so I don't know if we want to take it now.
Yes, as long as the public comment is regarding the agenda item, we can take just that comment now.
Okay. It's actually, they want to make a comment on future agenda items. So I know that's coming up later.
Right. We can take that comment when we get to, or when we recall that agenda item.
Okay. So I will go ahead and dismiss it now, but if you want to hear from Dr. Sims, perhaps?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Good morning. Yeah, just a friendly other. The California Physical Therapy Association annual meeting date for 2021 has been identified as October 9 and 10. The proposed calendar has it just TBA, but I have a date for you, and it's October 9 and 10, 2021. And just like everything else in the world, we're waiting on COVID to let us know if it's a face-to-face or virtual, et cetera.
So he says his audio doesn't work.
This is moderator. I'm seeing no further requests for public comments. So board president, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, and thank you, Dr. Sims, for supplying us those dates. And we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the executive officer's report.
Thank you, Madam President. I only have a few kind of brief items to touch on in my EO report. I'll start off with the admin section. Again, like a reoccurring theme that we've had for the last couple of meetings, we have a number of vacancies at the board to fill, and it's just informational in the sense that with COVID-19 and teleworking and those kind of things, with vacancies, also with supplying a staff member to contact tracing for the Department of Consumer Affairs, getting these vacancies is urgent at this point, and so we're going to be focusing a lot of resources in that regard. We have one AGPA position to fill as an additional probation monitor, one SSA position to fill as the board liaison to our board members, one office technician position to fill in the applications unit, and I'd like to introduce and provide an update to the members. We have successfully filled the position for our Assistant Executive Officer. The PTBC's own, very own Enforcement Manager, Elsa Ibarra, has been promoted to that position. Congratulations to Elsa. We're certainly happy to have her. I'm a partner to help with some of the administrative load, but in that hiring, that also creates a vacancy in the enforcement unit that will have to be filling as well. So there's an additional vacancy there as an SSM1 in the enforcement unit. I'd also like to congratulate 2 members of staff for promotion as well. Angel Otley in the Applications and Licensing Services unit has promoted from Office Technician to SSA, and she's taking on a bunch of new duties, and we're happy to have her. Also, Vincent Azar in the Consumer Protection Services unit has promoted from SSA to AGPA and will be taking on a large role in IT and reporting, kind of capitalizing on all of the information and data resources that we have at our disposal. Number 2 on my list is board appointments. We have a meeting next week that is the second meeting of one of DCA's consecutive board brown bag meetings for executive officers and bureau chiefs. Next week's will actually be, in particular, will be about board and bureau board member placement. And one of the things that you'll find in the agenda items is our template where we actually track you as board members inside of the board positions that you hold. And we're going to be, looks like we're going to be using that template and providing it to other boards and bureaus, well, boards inside of the Department of Consumer Affairs to help track those as well as DCA's exec office. So, you know, kudos to staff for creating that visual and making it very easy for us to tell when vacancies came, the history behind them, and those kind of things. So it looks like a tool that we're going to be able to use department-wide. The third item, the strategic plan. Again, with COVID-19, you know, while the process of tracking our strategic plan has kind of derailed, staff has continued to work on its goals and objectives, and we are making headway and progress. We were recently assigned a new analyst from the solid unit at DCA. In fact, our facilitator today, Tricia St. Clair, is our new analyst assigned to our action plan for solid. And so we're happy to have her. She's already helping us with a number of different things like follow-up surveys and focus groups with staff, helping us keep on track with our action plan and move through that strategic plan so that we can get as much of it done in that 5-year span as we planned. We do have a number of things to catch up on, but we've already started, and it's looking like we'll be really busy in the next couple months. Lastly, I have a kind of an update on the board's relocation. Construction upstairs is coming along quite nicely. We're about 90% done. So carpet, paint, doors, everything that needs to be done upstairs is done. The biggest holdup that we have at this point is, unfortunately, another COVID-19 related holdup. So we don't have cubicle furniture. The vendor that supplies our cubicle furniture is the California Prison Industry Authority, and they have some COVID-19 issues, so they're a little short on staffing. And so our projected plan and our projected date for move-in has been delayed. We will not actually receive cubicle furniture until probably the mid to late October, which would make our move upstairs projected to be the first or second week of November. And again, that's assuming that the current projected dates line up and that there's no further holdups with some of those kind of things. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them to the best that I can, but that is the extent of my executive officer report.
Any board member comments?
This is Daniel Drummer. Jason, I'm wondering, I mean, I know so most of us are appointed through the governor's office, and you have a tighter working relationship with the appointment office that way. But I'm wondering about the public member's position from the Speaker of the Senate, and where that may be standing, if we have any idea.
The current vacancy is with the Speaker of the Assembly, and we have had conversations with the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, Carrie Holmes, and we've been reassured that they are aware of the vacancies and they are working on them. I don't have any projected timelines as to when those positions might be filled. I do know that there is kind of a shortage of public members and people that they can call on to fill those vacancies, and so they are struggling with that. But again, it's something that we're trying to stay in constant contact. The vacancies are something certainly that I'm sensitive to. I would like to have a full board. As you know, the majority of my tenure at this board has had 7 members, and so 5 members. But we will continue to stay in contact and assist in helping with those appointments as much as we can. I believe that later in this agenda, when we touch on some of the consumer and professional associations and intergovernmental relations reports under the Department of Consumer Affairs, they may touch on that as well.
This is Tanya McMillan. I just want to say congratulations, Jason, to you and the staff and the promotions. And it's really a pleasure working with you guys. So then when you hear this kind of good news, especially during these times, it's nice to have a smile, you know? So just want to say congratulations to everybody.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate that. I want to accentuate the positives.
Any other board member comment? And moderator, will you please facilitate public comment on the executive officer's report?
Thank you, Madam President. I have now opened up the question and answer feature. So if you would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll give you a moment to access that. This is the moderator, and Madam President, we're seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Agenda item number 7, discussion regarding waivers issued by the Director of the California Department of Consumer Affairs.
So before you have a briefing paper that essentially kind of consolidates the waivers that affect the Physical Therapy Board of California. We've tried to organize them as best we can of the 4 waivers and their extensions. So I think the one that's most effective for our licensing population is the renewal waivers and the continuing education waivers that have both received a first and a second extension, and the second extension is in effect currently. So in layman's terms, after reading that waiver, a licensee should know that if their license expires during that period of time, that they are exempt from having to provide the continuing education during the renewal period. But after the order actually expires, they will be expected to have fulfilled their 30 hours within the following 6 months. This is the third section of renewal periods that have received this waiver. So as you can tell, when we come to you a year and a half from now, we're actually reporting audits. Our staff will be very sensitive to those folks that their license expired during this period of time and we'll have to kind of hash out when their continuing education was fulfilled, and being able to apply that 6-month extension for them. So we will still be auditing, but those audits will include these waiver extensions as a consideration. We also have a reinstatement of licensure waiver, and in that reinstatement of licensure really kind of only affects those that are under retired status. The examination requirement for continued physical therapy treatment has to do with direct access in AB 1000, 2620.1 in the Business and Professions Code, and essentially that if you have provided direct access to a patient as a licensee, that you can continue past the 45 visits, or I'm drawing a blank. Essentially, that you don't actually need to have your patient go back to the practitioner and have a face-to-face sign off on the plan of care, that can actually happen in a telehealth setting for convenience's sake during the global pandemic. So also for our applicants that are applying to be licensees, we've had an extension to satisfy examination requirements. Essentially, an application expires after 1 year. With fixed date testing and the examination only be given 4 times a year, this waiver would allow for that application to be extended by 6 months, which potentially could give them 2 more attempts during that application time. So if you have any questions about the waiver, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any board member comment on the waivers? And moderator, will you please facilitate public comment regarding agenda item number 7 regarding the waivers?
This is the moderator, and I have now opened up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right. If you don't see the Q&A panel, click on the question mark within a square in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and we are displaying instructions for your reference.
This is James Sims, and I have a question, if I may be recognized.
Yes, go right ahead, Dr. Sims.
I see that the extension dates till October 31st, 2020 for the second extension of the continuing education temporary waiver. The question I have is, if a individual, and help me with the process here, so if their license is expiring and are they obligated to then forward a renewal application? And then if they do, when it asks to attest, the attestation for Con Ed, if they check it yes, but they haven't done it, is that, they be purging themselves, and so they shouldn't. And if they don't check it, does it automatically kick them into, well, we're not going to renew your license because you didn't check the box? We have members and licentiates at large who are wondering what they should do there. They're worried about either purging themselves or not having a license renewed because that box wasn't checked. And if you can provide direction or counsel on that activity that we can then send out to the members and the licentiates.
Yeah, this is Jason Kaiser, the Executive Officer. I can assist with that. Essentially, the waiver is an opportunity to provide an accommodation for our licensees during this time. And so having said that, it's kind of a benefit of the doubt situation. When they are coming close to expiration and they're looking at that renewal form, the question is actually a little bit more specific, and it actually asks, are you in compliance with the continuing competency regulations? Because of this waiver, when it's in effect at the time, licensees can clearly answer yes, that they are in compliance at the time of renewal because the waiver is in place. They are still expected to obtain that continuing competency 6 months after this waiver is finished. And as you kind of alluded to, this waiver currently expires on October 31st, so the 6 months would follow from that date, unless because of circumstances with COVID and shutdowns as a result of the global pandemic, the director issues a third extension that would offset that 6 months to whenever the termination of that third extension is. So as an example, if she extended it until January 31st, it would be 6 months after that January 31st extension. But for now, anytime a licensee is going to renew, they can check yes. The only other opportunity they have is to check no, and that is to place them in an active status, which would prohibit them from practicing and also exempt them from the continuing education requirement. So my advice would be check yes if you intend to practice.
Yeah, and that makes sense because you're checking the box on the condition that there's an extension right now, so you really can check yes. You're not purging yourself because after the extension from the executive order is there for 6 months, then they have up till then to do it, and they can still do that. So I appreciate the comment because we've been getting a lot of questions on that in terms of what they should check. So thank you very much.
Not a problem. You're quite welcome.
Yeah.
And this is the moderator. I'm seeing no other requests for public comments. So, Madam President, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, we're going
moderator,
to...
and would you like me to close?
Sorry, did she hear me?
Yes, I've gone ahead and closed the Q&A panel.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to table agenda item number 8 until later in the agenda so we can get through some of this other business. We'll move to agenda item number 9, which is the Consumer and Professional Associations and Intergovernmental Relations Report. So anything from FSBPT? We don't have a FSBPT representative, I believe, here at the meeting, but anything from our representative or from staff to report?
I do have a few things to provide as an update during this period. Again, at the expense of sounding redundant, everything's a little bit different right now. And so normally at this point, we would be reporting on the Leadership Issues Forum, which is FSBPT's mid-year meeting on a road up to their delegate assembly. This year, the Leadership Issues Forum was, their in-person meeting was tabled and it was done in a virtual sense. We attended that meeting on July 22nd. And normally in that meeting, it's a 2-day meeting where they provide quite a lot of content for us to absorb. This year, they're actually providing that content every 2 to 3 weeks running up until the delegate assembly on October 22nd and 24th. So we have taken a number of webinar courses in the last few weeks. One of those that we're going to share with you this afternoon is a board member training. And we will continue to take those trainings moving up to the delegate assembly in October. And we'll be bringing a report to the December meeting about the delegate assembly as well.
Any other comments on FSBPT items? Okay, and we will move to Department of Consumer Affairs.
Good morning. This is Carrie Holmes, Deputy Director, Board and Bureau Relations at the Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for inviting me again to your meeting to provide a department update to the Physical Therapy Board. I'm happy to report that in July, the DCA Budget Office and Office of Information Services launched 4 new budget expenditure and revenue reports utilizing Fiscal information. The reports are fast, detailed, and easy to generate. The 4 new reports can be produced using DCA's Quality Business Interactive Reporting Tool, or QBIRT. These reports will aid board staff in providing budget reports to the board members in the meeting packets. DCA is very pleased to be providing these reports and is working on 3 more budget reports in the future. Another DCA priority is regulations, improving timelines and transparency. DCA's regulations unit was created by DCA Legal to directly assist boards and bureaus with regulations packages. The department also developed an online system to manage and track regulations packages and streamline their review called Sharewell. Sharewell testing with a pilot cohort is now complete. There will be regular check-ins with the pilot groups to solicit feedback, and the feedback will be evaluated to determine next stages of the rollout. Shortly before your June meeting, the DCA and all boards and bureaus had just reopened their offices to the public after a temporary closure due to state and local stay-at-home orders to prevent the spread of COVID-19. DCA offices remain open with preventative measures to safeguard the health and safety of our employees and visitors. I know this time has been challenging for everyone, and we are truly grateful to you for your continued service and to your staff for being so flexible. As you know, during the state of emergency, DCA has also been busy issuing waivers needed to maintain a licensed workforce during COVID-19. To date, DCA has issued 56 waivers ranging from continuing education requirements, telehealth requirements, and licensure reinstatements. We'd like to ask you to take a look at the existing waivers and changes that have affected your board and licensees. What might be helpful to keep in the long run? DCA is looking at identifying areas where changes could be made on an ongoing basis and welcomes any feedback or ideas. Lastly, I know your board has an interest in appointments. As Jason said earlier, your vacancies are on our radar, and we are doing all we can to make sure the appointing authorities know how much you want them filled. Your executive officer is doing a great job on this front, and though I don't have any specific news for you today, I can assure you it's not for lack of attention. As Jason mentioned, the applicant pool for public members can be small, so if you know anyone that would be a great board member, encourage them to put in an application. We will also be sending out a communications toolkit next week to help boards and bureaus spread the word about appointments on social media. So thank you for your patience, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on this. Thank you again for inviting me to your meeting. I do look forward to the day when we can meet in person. If you have any questions or need anything from DCA, please don't hesitate to reach out. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you for that great report, Carrie. That's very helpful. Do we have any comment from board members? And any follow-up staff comments?
I would just like to thank Ms. Holmes, myself. We've been in kind of constant contact, and she has provided solace to my anxiety at times. And I am very confident that DCA is assisting with the issues that we have with board appointments. So again, thank you for that. And again, I'm eager to receive the social media package next week and discuss it amongst the executive officers. I also appreciate those brown bag meetings. I think that's an excellent idea as well.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much to you and your staff for sharing the template for board member appointments tracking.
Okay, and next is California Physical Therapy Association.
Good morning. This is James Sims, representing the California Physical Therapy Association. Two issues that I want to bring up. Number one, first of all, that you are invited, the PT Board of California is invited to be an exhibitor at the virtual chapter annual conference. That's going to be October 3rd and 4th. We encourage and hope you would participate as an exhibitor at the meeting. Quite a few licensed participate in that, and it's always good for them to see the PT board and be aware of the activities that the board does on their behalf as the licensing agency for them. The second issue is that the CPTA submitted in writing an inquiry, and I'm not sure when it was, regarding the physical therapist removal of drains or IVs. And I was wondering if there's a status update on a response to that or where that is in the process.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. It's Jason Kaiser again. Yeah, we do have kind of a brief update on that. We're almost finished with the response on that. It's been a consultation back and forth with DCA counsel assigned to the board. And once we have that formalized, we'll get it out to the association. I would imagine that we're about 30 days.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sims. Anything else from CPTA? And any board comment for CPTA? Okay, moderator, will you please facilitate public comment for agenda item number 9?
Thank you, Madam President. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. If any members of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and Madam President, I see no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, agenda item number 10, our legislation report.
So leadership in the Assembly and Senate requested that only the most critical and pressing bills move forward. This is due to the state of the ongoing pandemic. Therefore, there were only 384 bills that passed through both houses and went to the governor for signature this session. This is a very significant decrease from the last legislative session, which had 1,217 bills reach the governor's desk. So it equates to almost a 70% decrease of bills that went to the governor this session. And again, that's due to the pandemic. Two legislative calendar highlights I wanted to point out is that August 31st was the last day for each house to pass bills, and September 30th is the last day for the governor to act on passed legislation. I'll go ahead and provide an update on the status of each bill that the board is watching. The legislative summary starts on page 48, and I'll start with AB 8888, the opioid prescriptions information, non-pharmacological treatments for pain. This bill is dead as it did not pass out of the Senate by the deadline. The next bill on the agenda is AB 1263, Contracts, Consumer Services, Consumer Complaints. This bill is dead as well as it didn't pass out of the Senate. However, the provisions of this bill prohibiting a contract or proposed contract involving the provision of consumer service by a licensee regulated by a licensing board from limiting the consumer's ability to file a complaint with the licensing board against the licensee or from participating in a board's investigation was amended into SB 1474. SB 1474, which I'll be talking about here in a little bit, is the bill that extends the board sunset date by 1 year. SB 1474 is enrolled and the governor has not acted on this bill. So provisions of this bill again have been amended into SB 1474. Moving on to AB 1616, DCA boards expunge convictions. This bill is also dead as it did not pass out of the Senate. The next bill is AB 1665, athletic trainers. The board did submit a letter of opposition, which I included in the meeting materials, a copy of that. This bill is also dead as it did not pass out of the Senate. AB 1850, workers, classification, employees, and independent contractors, which would have provided exemptions to the ABC test for employment status, is also dead as it did not pass out of the Senate. AB 2028, state agencies meeting, is also dead as it did not pass out of the Senate by the deadline. AB 2113, refugees, asylees, and special immigrant visa holders, professional licensing, initial licensure process, would require a board to expedite and assist the initial licensure process for an applicant who supplies satisfactory evidence to the board that they are a refugee, have been granted asylum, or have a special immigrant visa. This bill was enrolled on September 1st, and the governor has not yet acted on this bill. AB 2410, athletic trainers. The board submitted a letter of support, which we included in the meeting materials. This bill is dead as well as it did not pass out in the Senate. AB 2549, DCA licenses, or excuse me, DCA temporary licenses is dead as it did not pass out of the Senate. And the next bill, AB 3045, DCA boards, veterans, military spouses, is also dead as it did not pass out of the Senate by the deadline. SB 878, DCA license application processing timeframes, would require the board to display at least on a quarterly basis its average timeframes for processing initial and renewal license applications prominently on the board's website. Was enrolled on September 10th, and the governor has not yet acted on this bill. And the last bill on the legislative summary is SB 1474, Businesses and Professions. As mentioned earlier in this report, it extends the board's sunset date by 1 year. It was also recently amended to include the provisions of AB 1263, Consumer Complaints. And this bill was enrolled and was presented to the governor. However, he has not acted on this bill as well. Did the board have any questions on any of the bills on the legislative summary?
So for AB 2113, any guess how that will impact board staff or processes?
Given the volume of applications that we receive for foreign credentialed applicants, I think that, I don't really like to use this term very often, but minor and absorbable, right? I think the number of applications that we receive that are affected by this bill would be, in the range of a handful a year, maybe up to a dozen a year at this point. So I don't think it's going to have an impact per se on the application processing times. It would just be another expedite process that we were putting in place with a few more documentary requirements as far as asylums or refugee.
And they're still required to go through the same credential evaluation and same process that any other foreign educated PT would go through. I'm just wondering, how would you expedite that? Just move them to the top of the list?
Move them to the top of the list and provide them maybe a little bit more assistance when it comes to how to go about finding that credentialing system, the same services that we provide to essentially the foreign applicants that we have today, and also expediting the process for clinical placement and clinical site approval, things like that.
Okay. That makes sense.
This is Daniel Drummer. Just a further question about that particular bill. Does it require the applicant to declare that they're a refugee or that they're granted asylum or have this special immigrant visa so that they're identified that way?
It does, and there's no place in the actual application process for it as of yet. But there may be changes that need to be made to the electronic brief system as a result of passing of this legislation. Until those changes are made, what we would do is just provide as much information as possible on our website to those applicants to bring it to our attention through email or through written correspondence so that we can, make those notations and make those changes behind the scenes and get those expedites done as quickly as possible.
And then this is Daniel Drummer with just a question about process. So my understanding is that there are two ways that the bills could be enacted, and that is if the governor signs it or if the governor takes no action. If he just lets it sit on the desk, then it becomes enacted. And there's only one way for the bill to die at this point, and that would be if the governor vetoes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And do we have any idea at this point as to where the governor's actions may be with the bills that have been enrolled that we're watching?
With the volume of bills that are currently enrolled and sitting on the governor's desk at this point, typically, in a given legislative session, we kind of have an idea as far as priority. However, this year with COVID-19, there really is no sense of, what bills are prioritized over others. Again, while it's still a reduction in the number of bills that have been enrolled and sent to the governor for signature, it's still a significant number given the circumstances, right? There's a lot of bills sitting in the governor's office for signature. Time is of the essence. We only have about 2 weeks at this point for those to be signed. But I think some of the other things to consider is like other sections of the legislative calendar, some extensions have been made because of exigent circumstances, state of emergency, that kind of thing. So while it's expiring in about 2 weeks, we might find that maybe there's an extension to that period of time. But essentially, if he does not veto a bill, that bill would go into effect on that date without any kind of extension provided. So I have essentially no clue as to whether or not this is a bill that's on his radar for veto.
Mm-hmm. So,
Dr. Drummond,
this
is Michael. I thought I'd add a couple additional facts for you.
Thank you.
First, the deadlines around the signatures for bills are directly in the California Constitution, so that is not something that could be waived. And specifically with regard to SB 1474, can't forecast how the governor may choose to deal with that measure, but it is the Business and Professions Committee's omnibus bill for the year. So there are many, many provisions in that bill, and it deals with many, many different boards in the department, and that the sunset extensions there are many other sunset extensions in that bill that affect many other boards that were due. So I can't forecast what the governor will do, but that bill is a yearly bill that is done with lots of, it's presumed that they are non-controversial changes that can move the way through the process.
Thank you for that.
Quite welcome.
Then does the governor have the ability for line item veto or not?
Not on this because it's not an item of appropriation. That only applies to the blue pencil only applies to specific items of appropriation. So meaning money can be reduced or eliminated.
Right. Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Any other board comment on any of the bills? I actually also wanted to ask a similar question about SB 878 and should this bill be enacted, how that might impact the board resource-wise, or any other comments that you have about presenting this information online?
878 has been on our radar for quite some time. And I think regardless of whether this bill is passed or vetoed, it's something that we've talked about doing on a voluntary basis anyway. Just a couple weeks ago, we started implementing posting our wait times through our social media accounts so that applicants for licensure can see both our intake times and our licensure times. The requirements of this bill are a little vague. I mean, so the way the bill asks us to post this information is either in specific or in average times. And the in average times essentially make the data kind of useless, right? So it's something that we want to be able to provide on the applicants tab of our website anyway. So again, we're getting to a point now with kind of fine-tuning Breeze and making Breeze work for us more efficiently, that we can report on that data very accurately. And hopefully, probably to start off with, we'll be doing it monthly, but as we become more, normalized and familiar with the data, I'd like to be able to post those, updated every Friday so that the applicants can see weekly the progress that's being made.
That would be awesome. Any other board comments? And moderator, will you please facilitate public comment on agenda item number?
Can I just do one staff comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, one staff comment.
It's okay. Thank you. I just wanted to kind of highlight, based on Dr. Drummer's comments from before, SB 1474. When we were looking at the calendar and we were talking about adding dates for meetings based on what we thought was going to be a projected sunset, SB 1474 has essentially extended the board's legislative authority by a year. So we now expire January 1st of 2023 as opposed to 2022. So we won't actually be doing sunset this year. We will be going through sunset this time next year. And so we'll receive the report, sometime in June or July of 2021, start forming a panel and a strategy and coming to the board for, recommendations of changes in sunset next year. And so just, it's not ideal. We did have some things that we'd like to address, but with the given circumstances of COVID-19, some of the boards that were up for sunset this year have been delayed till next year. And so in a way, it's just trickled down. We're just standing in line.
Any board comment regarding sunset?
This is Daniel Drummer. So will it just defer the next sunset process for those as a delay, like you said, for standing in line, or will it push everybody back in their calendars 1 year forever?
Sunsets are kind of different for each individual board based on their performance in sunset anyway, right? So the boards that were up for sunset next year with us, some of them are still going next year. And those more, in the eyes of the legislature, at least inconsequential boards or less controversial boards, have been delayed to kind of make room for business that is a little bit more urgent and a little bit more of a higher priority. The boards that were supposed to go this year, as you can imagine, are going to be dealt with in the next legislative session and sunset next year, along with a few that were supposed to be for next year are still on the calendar. But whether it delays us kind of ongoing from that point forward, a board's performance and what the legislature deems as appropriate, we could do extremely well like we have in the past and had 4 and 5 year sunset extensions. And for those boards that require maybe a little bit more attention from the legislature, the legislature may issue a sunset, what we would call a sunrise bill at that point, for even 2 and 3 years, essentially meaning that we're going to extend a board's authority, but only for 2 to 3 years, and we want those boards to come back earlier than normal because they have some issues or concerns that the legislature wants to address. So it won't delay everyone, and that part of the process is kind of piecemeal anyway. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay, and so moderator, will you please facilitate public comment on agenda item 10?
Thank you, Madam President. This is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference.
This is Dr. Sims. I'd like to make a comment if I could be recognized.
Yes, Dr. Sims, go right ahead.
Yeah. Speaking for the CPTA here and relevant to AB 888, the opioid prescriptions by Evan Lowe, I want to invite you all and any and all persons regarding a symposium that is going to be held on November 7th, 2020. It's a virtual symposium on a pain seminar, which will identify the physical therapist's current research and involvement in pain. It's particularly important if you look at the summary that's up there on the materials for today, that the prescribers now need to discuss availability of non-pharmacological intervention. And I think it's kind of a step forward in maybe the board and all just in healthcare, that to be more preventive rather than treat it after it's a problem. the opioid crisis was a very high profile activity in terms of healthcare prior to the COVID pandemic. But that doesn't mean that the opioid problem has gone away. So I invite anyone, everyone, even clinicians and non-clinicians to become more familiar about the physical therapist's role and the role of physical therapy in non-pharmacological avenues and options available to patients for pain mitigation. So that'll be on, again, November 7th, 2020. Thank you.
This
And
is Daniel Drummer. Pardon me. Dr. Sims, do you have information about how individuals can be invited to or join that symposium?
I would suspect it's on the CPTA website. It's just like a Con Ed offering. And so you register as you would for the chapter annual conference or any other webinar that the association is now offering. And you do not have to be a licentiate to participate. And I think it's good for everyone's background information regarding this issue, and potentially maybe the board will consider a position on if a bill of AB 888 similar bill would be introduced next session.
all right, this is the moderator, and I see no further requests for public comment. Madam President, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and so the time is 10:23, and before we take any further agenda items, I'd like to offer this time for a break. And if we could be back no later than 10:35, we'll get started with agenda item number 11.
Katarina-Elaby.
Present.
Jesus Dominguez.
Present.
Daniel Drummer.
Present.
Sonia McMillian.
Present.
All members are present and the board has a quorum.
Thank you. And we will move into agenda item number 11, rulemaking report.
I'll go ahead and direct the members to the 2020 rulemaking update. This is page 57 of the materials. And the first rulemaking item on the report is the examination passing standard, setting examination score. This regulation was in legal for review. However, after further discussion and research by board staff, it was determined that specifying a pass point in regulation was not necessary. So the board decided to withdraw the rulemaking package on July 20th, 2020, due to lack of necessity. The next rulemaking item on the rulemaking report is the disciplinary guidelines regulation, and board staff have been working with DCA Legal on these, and we'll go ahead and be discussing additional modifications to the guidelines that may be necessary under agenda item 11C. The coursework tool regulation was forwarded to DCA Legal for their review in August. Staff will continue to work with legal to finalize the package and submit it to agency for review. The next item is the performance evaluation tool for foreign educated PTs completing a supervised clinical practice in the U.S. And this package was also submitted to DCA Legal for their review in August. The AB 2138 regulations is the next item on the rulemaking update, and these were publicly noticed by OAL on June 26, 2020. The 45-day comment period ended on August 21st. The board did receive written comments during this period and will address them under agenda item 11B and also discuss any additional modifications that may be necessary to this rulemaking package as recommended by OAL. And the other rulemaking items listed on this tracking form will be presented for board consideration at upcoming meetings in the future. Did the board have any additional questions on the rulemaking update?
No board member comment. Any further staff comment?
Maybe a little bit further explanation for the removing of the regulation for setting the pass point. We had extensive conversations with DCA's Office of Professional Examination Services, and based on some recommendations there, setting a pass point and actually putting it in regulation wasn't specified in the statute. It actually said the board must set a pass point, but it does not follow it up by saying through regulation. And so their recommendation was, to the extent that you could avoid doing that, it was their recommendation that we should. And then just kind of looking at the conversations that we had going back and forth, deferring to FSDPT's authority or specifying the 600 pass point, that was the best thing to do. And so we've removed that package from the calendar. Our existing statute is perfectly fine the way it is, and we'll just continue to try and provide that information as information on our board website under the licensees and applicants tabs, so that it's very easy for them to find, but not necessary to be specified in regulation.
Thank you, Jason. Any other board comment? Okay, hearing none, let's go to agenda item 11B.
So for this item, we have board reg counsel with us, Clay Jackson, who's going to provide explanation to his briefing paper on some of the changes for the 2138 regulations, and I will defer to him and hand off.
Good morning, members of the board and staff. This is Clay Jackson. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Great. Okay. On AB 2138, DCA Legal in January 2019 worked with OAL and worked with others, including the Attorney General's office, to come up with a template that we would be able to use on all 35 of the 21 pages that would be submitted by DCA to OAL. And so the first one, as set forth in the memo, was to have, we thought, sailed through OAL last November. And that was VetMed. And lo and behold, when it got to OAL, they requested numerous changes. And so it needed to be withdrawn in November 2019. Subsequent to that, every other DCA package, so 34 other packages, needed to or will need to have the same changes that VetMed had put into their packages in order to make it through OAL. VetMed was submitted in June this year. A lot of the setback was because of COVID and diversion of agency and other resources, including OAL. So that one still has not passed through OAL, but that now is because of a revision by the Department of Finance. And so the fiscal documents that support the package are holding up that and other DCA packages that are going to go through. And so I say that so that you're really not, these changes aren't late, and the reason why these revisions are being recommended to the board is because they are the OAL revisions that are necessary to be able to get the package through OAL upon submission following a 15-day comment period, and once these are made, your package will pretty much mirror the VetMed and all of the current submissions that are being made by DCA to OAL. So if I could, I'd like to just go directly to the text. The memo states a lot of what I just said. And so if you look at the text on page 65, we're only looking at the things that are double underlined and double strike through. Everything else the board has already approved. And so just to give you background or comment beyond the comment, the first one for 1399.20, we changed that because even though it's a substantial change and because things need to be substantially related to the actual need to be substantially related to the actual qualifications, function, and duties of a physical therapist. That's why that change was necessary. And so moving down, the "and" was removed, non-substantial change, only done because they changed the formatting between last January and last November. 480 was changed as an authority. It was originally in the template, and then OAL asked to have it removed from the template. And then just this summer, OAL said, no, we need it back as an authority. That is a non-substantial change, which means it wouldn't have to go to the board, but I'm bringing it to your attention just because it is a change. Moving down to the next page, we've got on the ground the applicant was versus has been convicted. They felt that the tense was wrong, which is why it's been changed. The other part, next, and is presently eligible for a license. They didn't believe that eligible was clear. And so for clarity, which is one of the 6 points that OAL must look for in revising or in reviewing a package, that lack of clarity is why that was dropped and changed. So that has been made. Moving down.
Clay?
Yes.
This is Jason Kaiser. Just for the board members' consideration, if you have any questions as we're going through these documents, please bring them to our attention. We'd like to address them as Clay's going over them instead of kind of readdressing them going back through the document.
Thank you for that. This is Daniel, drummer board member. I have a concern or a comment about in that sentence, it reads, applicant was convicted of a crime. The board shall consider whether the applicant made a showing of rehabilitation. I believe there should be an "and" or an "or" following that to be able to make the sentence an appropriate sentence, because the first part reads as a clause, but then the "if applicant completed the issue without a violation or parole probation," that piece doesn't link with the rest of the sentence. So I believe there needs to be some form of a conjunction there, and not just a comma.
And would work. I wouldn't say that as being substantive.
We'll note that change.
Okay.
And
so
then
anyway,
just, sorry, I had one other comment.
Sure.
I'm wondering, is there some description further down that talks about showing of rehabilitation? Because it seems like, okay, otherwise
that's the whole next section.
Okay, otherwise and pardon me for not recalling that in trying to dive through the legalese. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. And so anyway, a lot of this is very technical in nature, and because OAL is the one that gets to say whether your regulation passes muster or doesn't, that's why our office has essentially taken what they've asked us to do and done it. So pretty much most everything I'm going to be talking about are in the comments on the side. So
Clay, before we
Alicia,
go forward,
yeah,
we do want to go back and address that issue with the conjunction with and or not. Legal counsel Michael Knotes is in the room. He has comment.
Hi, Clay. This is Michael.
Hello.
Adding the word "and" there would seem to me to make it more of a list. Here, the last phrase is a condition. If the applicant completed the criminal sentence at issue without a violation of parole or probation, then that makes the rest of that sentence true. I think it's drafted fine as is. When I draft things, I tend to start with conditions. Because this is the opening to the standards that are at play for one who has completed the criminal sentence. And then later in the draft, and B is the not completed and the different set. So I don't think an and should go in there in terms of a conjunction of two items.
Actually, if you look at the way it's written, Michael's right to the extent that the or is at the end, where it says the beginning of the blue or the denial. So it's this, or this. The board shall apply one of the following criteria. Shall apply the following criteria. Is that what you're saying, Michael?
Well, I thought we were inserting an and in A after the statement presently eligible for a license, or were you already in B?
I'm in B.
So yeah, the comment has to be?
Yes.
I believe Dr. Drummer's comment is in reference to A, if I'm correct. Is that correct, Daniel?
Yes.
Oh, I had taken it to B.
Okay, so let me just respond to that then, Daniel, because I don't think we should have an and there, because the end of that phrase where it states, if the applicant completed the criminal sentence at issue without a violation of parole or probation, that is stating that only those individuals are going to be subject to 1 through 5 below. If the person did not successfully complete probation parole, then the standards that are applied to that person are in B.
I follow.
Great.
Thank you, Michael.
That is all.
Are you okay with not putting the and in?
I'm okay with not putting the and in. I think, though, that we need to remove the comma then, don't we?
I think the comma is okay there. It's in the original. And so it's in the original revision that was made last year.
Okay.
And whether the applicant has been convicted of the crime, comma, it's kind of a pause for a breath. The board shall consider whether.
Okay.
Jason Kaiser, I guess my point would be is that comma or no comma, I think the language is still as legal, kind of with or without. So I think it's a preference of style. It's currently there. I just need to know for the record if I'm leaving it in or taking it out. So when we record the motion to adopt this language, that we do it correctly.
I'm good with leaving it in. I'm good with leaving it in.
Okay. Thank you. So Clay, if you want to pick up on B.
Yeah, sure. So on B, if you read it, different boards have had the same question where it says without violation of parole or probation, and is better left out there because it's the same thing we just discussed. If the applicant has not completed, without a violation of parole or probation, comma, the board determines that blah, 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 down to rehabilitation. The colon is actually at the end of rehabilitation. I didn't move it up. So that's actually the beginning of the list for the shopping list down below. If you look at the addition of professional misconduct, that was done because that's what's in the statute. So it added professional misconduct throughout. So you'll note that it's there. It's in B2, or it's in 2, and you'll see it throughout the rest of the changes. If everybody's okay with that page, the comments explain what's going on. Moving down to the next section, here's the rehabilitation section that we started discussing before. And so under section 490 of the code was changed so that people would understand where this was coming from. Yeah, although if you read all of 2138, you'd know that this was considered to be added for clarity. And then once again in B, language was stricken, and it was because just like in the prior section, it had said if subdivision A is inapplicable, OAL did not like that for this revision. So OAL added the language if the licensee has not completed the criminal sentence at issue, and that's very similar to what's above. And then it goes down once again to the shopping list, starting at rehabilitation. Severity was changed to gravity. This is just a revision of synonyms. It was done in the statute, so this was done to mirror the statute. Disciplinary action is used here and not professional misconduct. So that this way you're looking at suspensions and revocations for people that have licenses, not granting new licenses. Hence, disciplinary actions instead of professional misconduct in both there and in 3. These are non-substantial changes.
I have a question about in 1, adding disciplinary actions in that place between the acts and the words acts and crimes.
Yes.
Because the nature of the acts and crimes are what the individual did. And disciplinary actions are things that are imposed by others and are not necessarily the nature of the act and crime.
Personally, I agree with you.
Okay.
Personally, I agree with you.
My head's in the right space.
OAL didn't agree with us, so they wanted it there. And so this was added. Even though it says non-substantial change, they wanted this added, and so I added it to yours. And
could it be added as a separate item?
Dr. Drummer? We had I agree with you as well. We had an extensive conversation about this particular insertion. And for the purposes of conformity and uniformity of language, we know that this is an issue that OAL has found in a previous package submitted by another board.
Mm-hmm.
So we could make changes. I would recommend against it, though. I think for the purposes of passage and getting this regulation approved through OAL, knowing a little bit of history and having kind of almost a precaution, if you will, is why the language is inserted the way it is. Again, I want to emphasize that I agree with your statement. I argued it myself in previous conversations, but I've come to grips with it at this point.
And to add to what Jason, taking it down to the simplest level, I look at it as on Sesame Street when they say one of these things is not like the other. The fact that you've got 35 other or 34 others of these that are going in with disciplinary actions is why I would recommend leaving it in. So you're right, but unfortunately, we do want this to look like all of the others, not only, throughout DCA. And I did just pull the vet med, and I'm looking at the vet med right now, and they did add disciplinary actions here. But I agree, it would probably be better with professional misconduct or unprofessional conduct, even more so. But that's not what was added. Are there any other questions on these revisions?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Okay. And Jason, would you want to do a vote on this one individually, since the next one will probably also require a vote?
Okay, do we have a motion by a board member?
I move to, this is Daniel Drummer, board member. I move to approve the proposed regulatory text for Title 16 CCR sections 1399.20, 1399.21, and 1399.22. Direct staff to submit the text to the Director of Consumer Affairs and Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for further review. If no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to amend the preceding rulemaking project, initiate a revised rulemaking process, make any non-substantive technical and grammatical changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Drummer. Do we have a second?
Second, Tanya McMillan.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. And do we have any further board discussion? Moderator, will you please facilitate public comment?
This is the moderator, and I have now opened the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator, and I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Madam President, would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a motion by Dr. Drummer. We have a second by Ms. McMillan. And if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Alicia Rabena-Amen.
Aye.
Katerina Ellaby.
Aye.
Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0, motion carried.
Thank you. And 11C, please.
So for this package, you have a briefing paper that kind of maps out some of the amended or changes to text that the board has worked on in preparation for the disciplinary guidelines. We do have the benefit of having our regulatory attorney, Clay Jackson, with us. There are essentially 3 changes that we're asking for. Some of them are based off of review by DCA Legal Counsel's regulatory unit, plus staff also identified one particular area that was an inadvertent or a misunderstanding in deletion, so we'd like to be able to explain that. If you will direct your attention to page 83 of the materials, we can talk about the substance abuse rehabilitation program and some of the language that we are actually proposing changing there. Clay, is there anything that you want to take the wheel here or add to, or would you like me to do it?
Just a comment.
Excuse me, Jason, can you repeat that page number? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Page 83 of the materials is the actual proposed language that we're asking the board's attention on.
Thank you.
Just a comment that I like the fact that you're taking out the fees, the specific fees from the language, because of the fact that you're not setting the fees and you're stuck with essentially whatever the industry or one of your providers has. So taking it out of here does exactly what staff has indicated, which is you're not having to go back in and every time someone changes their fees, and that would be up or down. So I really like what staff is proposing here. And that's it, Jason.
Thank you, Clay. And that's essentially what we're asking the board to consider in a nutshell. Is this information is probably better presented to applicants and licensees on the board's website, because that information could change based on whatever given, as an example, rehabilitation program we make contract with. Costs can change or fluctuate over time, and we can provide much more information on the board's website that's tailored to an individual's, particular circumstances. So we just looked at the package and how we were putting the costs here with the idea of providing that information, and decided that the board's website and also our Maximus information that we provide to probationers is probably a better source for that information. So we've recommended a few deletions, and you can see them under monthly administrative fee, where we've deleted the monthly administrative fee is currently language, and we've just included language that essentially says, for additional information, please visit the board's website. It does say currently right now, ptbc.ca.gov/licensees. There will be another hashtag which actually has a more direct link to the information that is specific to the board's drug rehabilitation program. And that comment goes for all 3 of the hyperlinks. The hyperlink language and edits to it are non-substantive in nature, because we're just directing the spirit of that information and giving the actual precise location for it. So under random biological testing, we've also deleted that information that was specific to costs, and included an insertion of language. The participant is required to pay the costs. The frequency of testing can vary and is scheduled randomly throughout the year, just to provide clarity. There's nothing there that we anticipate would be changing and necessitating a regulatory change in the future. And then the one last and final would be the professional support group meetings. The same thing applies. We wanted to provide more accurate information with a more efficient vehicle being the board's website, and removing the actual costs from that 3rd category. And so if the board is in agreement with that change, or if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll hold a second for comment before we move on to the next section.
This is Daniel Drummer, board member. Jason, I very much appreciate the comments of the placeholders for the specific web pages for the information. That was one of the concerns that I had, rather than just steering people to a more general web page. There are a couple of edits that I would like to suggest. Under random biologic testing, the paragraph that's underlined, the participant is required to pay the RBT. I would suggest adding the word cost, as you stated, but it doesn't say there. Pay the RBT costs at a fee set by the rehabilitation program. And then a question, are the costs set by the program or are the costs set by the sites?
So there's actually two. There are costs that are imposed by the program, and then geographically, the costs can vary by site collection. But even those, I think, still fall under the program itself.
Okay.
So we'll add costs after RBT.
Thank you
for that clarification.
In the following paragraph, the second sentence or second line, the end of it reads, support groups all charge different fees and negotiate directly with the participant. I would suggest striking all charge different fees and just leave it as support groups negotiate directly with the participant or negotiate fees directly with the participant.
So ultimately, that sentence would just read, support groups negotiate fees directly with the participant.
That's my suggestion.
We've made that note and we'll make that change.
Thank you, Dr. Drummer. Any other suggestions?
The following paragraph, BB biological testing. The final sentence in paragraph, all examination and laboratory testing costs associated with this condition shall be paid by the respondent. I understand that this is relating to condition BB, but without that knowledge that I know that these are called conditions, it may be understood that we're talking about the condition of being a substance abuser. So I'm wondering if we struck associated with this condition and just leave it as all examination and laboratory costs shall be paid by the respondent.
I'm okay with that edit. I'll just make a note that that's not, that's previously adopted language. The insertion is single underlined for that reason. So that's language that the board has seen before. It's not necessarily change that we're presenting here today, but for clarity, I appreciate the comment. We can actually make that change as long as the board members want to include it in the changes that are being made today.
I like the suggestion. Any other board comment on that?
Madam President, this is Jesus. I agree with that. Just so we're clear on what the condition means. Yep.
Okay. How about from our public members, Ms. Ellaby, Ms. McMillian?
Tanya McMillan, no comments.
This is Katerina. I agree with the proposed changes.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Drummer, any other suggestions?
In the next paragraph, the third sentence down, where it reads a minimum range of 36 to 104. The minimum range piece is throwing me, and I would suggest saying and between 36 and 104 random tests instead.
I'll have to verify, but I believe some of that language is direct quote from the 1441 standards. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can't paraphrase them here. So I think that if you'd like to make that change just for clarity's sake, we'll make that note into the record, assuming the board would like to make that change.
Dr. Drummer, can you repeat what the change would be? What would that read?
So we would strike, so it would strike a minimum range and instead insert the word between. So then it would read, and I guess we would do the same thing in that first sentence where it's in the first year, subject to between 52 but not to exceed 104 random tests, and then here in this section, in this part, and between 36 to 104 random tests.
I'm wondering what the intent of minimum range meant. Does that mean that that range cannot get any smaller? That range of testing cannot get any smaller? Why is that language there?
So it looks like our change is to add the word range, correct? That's the insertion. And before it did say subject to a minimum of 52, but not to exceed 104, or in this case, a minimum of 36, not to exceed 104.
Yes.
But now we're adding the word range in there.
And so you'll see the board has previously discussed this and decided to delete language that says, but not to exceed. And so I think that's consistent with the conversation that we're having right now, where you're also recommending to delete the language that says minimum range, right? So you're just being very specific that the language says subject to 52 to 104 random tests per year without saying what it exceeds or what a minimum range is. And so we can make those changes to with that understanding.
Because the minimum is at least 52 for the first year and at least 36. I mean, those numbers are there and that's not changed.
Right. And I think it's very clear.
Yeah.
And Jason, this is Clay. I looked up the word range since the essentially the law requires that it be understood as its definition, and it says the extent to which the extent to which or limits between which variation is possible, or the extent or scope of the operation or acting of something. So that would be consistent with having it there. It's just the first one, at least, between these two limits.
Yeah, I think for conversation purposes here, and what I'm hearing from the members is that simpler is better, and so it's just specifying.
I agree. There was just a question before as to what it meant, and so that's what I was just pointing out. Is it sounds odd here, so I don't blame them for wanting to take it out. But so anyway.
So is the language now going to remove the word range?
It would remove, as we have previously discussed, removing but not to exceed. Similar to that, we're now removing the language says to a minimum range, and we're just being very specific and stating respondents shall be subject to 52 to 104 random tests per year within the first year of probation, and 36 to 104 random tests per year thereafter for the duration of the probationary term.
Yeah. How does that sit, Dr. Drummer?
Thank you very much for that clarity. That's exactly the point.
Okay.
It says what it is, clear and direct, without any flourish.
And in the interim, during our conversation, we were able to verify that the language was direct quote from 1441. But again, we can, for the purposes of the model guidelines, paraphrase and be more specific or clearer, if you will, in proposing this language. So we'll make those changes as well and include them in any kind of motion to adopt this language.
Great. Any other comments from the board?
This is Daniel Drummer. In the next paragraph, just for uniformity of language, in the second sentence, it says respondent must submit to drug testing. I would suggest changing drug to biological testing, because that's the category, that's the terminology that's used consistently rather than changing a word.
And we'll make that notation as well, as long as the board is okay with it and include it in the motion to adopt.
Yeah, I like it, Dr. Drummer.
So if we're ready to move to page 84, I think the changes here are a little bit easier to explain, a little bit simpler, if you will. You'll see in the comments provided on the right-hand column, we had asked for a deletion of the word positive and an insertion of the word dilute, and also a deletion of a good section of language that read, if it's determined respondent altered the test results, the results shall be considered an omission of a positive urine screen and constitutes a violation of probation, and respondent must cease practicing. Respondent shall not resume practicing until notified by the board, period. Previously, we had asked that highlighted section be deleted. We realized after concurrent review from the board's previously adopted language that was an error on our part. Those are two different things, so we'd like to restore that language back to its original structure. And so it would now read, as it had before, a positive result with the additions of the word in this case is one based on scientific principles, and then going back down to the previously deleted recommendation, restoring it to keeping it where it was originally, and reading with if it is determined and following all the way through until it says until notified by the board.
Comments by the board?
This is Daniel Drummer. The respondent doesn't alter the test result. The respondent alters the test sample. And then the result follows what tests are being performed.
I'm okay with that change.
And then I understand that the majority of these tests are urine screens, but I would want to consider changing urine to a positive test result or something to that effect. As if a blood sample or a hair sample was tested and that's indicated up above that those may be methods of testing, then we're eliminating those as tools for us to use.
Would just striking urine screen and replacing with positive results?
Yes.
Okay. I agree.
So this section that's being added back in looks a lot like the section at the end of the prior paragraph.
Yeah, and that was the confusion of the mistake that we had made previously, was deleting them thinking that they were redundant. The previous paragraph speaks to diluted samples that can happen for any number of reasons outside of the respondent's control, right? Biological issues, medical issues that they may be suffering from. This paragraph is in direct response to the intent to alter, right? To actually influence through altering their sample. And so they are two totally different things. They're very similar in language and similar in nature, but one really is about something that can naturally occur and really shouldn't be held against the respondent in that situation, where this paragraph is very specific about the respondent's intention to actually alter and result in a negative result by altering the sample, as Dr. Gummer pointed out.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time seeing the difference.
I think one of the other reasons, well, you have the previous page also, so
Do other board members see the same language in my concern?
Reading carefully, not ignoring.
Thank you.
Alicia, repeat your concerns one more time.
Sure. So the one paragraph that Jason was referring to that's highlighted in pink on page 84, that section, the large sentence in pink, looks a lot like the sentence at the end of the paragraph prior to this paragraph. So I'm having a hard time understanding why it's in two places.
and I think it's kind of a break in paragraph issue. So the paragraph above goes on to the beginning of this paragraph, where it essentially says, if a positive result is obtained, the board may order respondent to cease practice and require the respondent to immediately undergo a physical examination and complete laboratory or diagnostic testing to determine if any underlying physical condition has contributed to the diluted result. The physical examination is one of the respondent themselves, where we want to find out if that dilution is a result of any kind of medical condition or something that was naturally occurring with the respondent, not necessarily the respondent trying to alter the result. It happens once in a while. We'll get diluted results. Somebody overhydrates or has a lack of creatine in their system because of a medical condition. We go on further to state also, though, that when a positive result in this case, and we added the addition of language in this case to try and specify the intent of altering for the purposes of obtaining a negative result, differentiating between the two. One that could happen to them, and in those cases, we'll actually order another biological fluid testing and a physical examination by a physician to find out if there's a underlying medical cause that created the dilute. But we also want to address the issue of any of the respondent or probationer trying intentionally through dilution or any other means to alter the sample and create a negative result when it normally would have been positive.
Just a little muddy.
Yeah, and it is, and that language also too is taken from the guidelines. And the way it was written previously never really caused any concerns. We had that same confusion in review that it did seem redundant. But after the fact, we also didn't want to, in our review and our consideration of redundancy, remove any of our tools to be able to further discipline or sanction a licensee based on that intent. That intent was very important for us to keep.
So the end of the prior paragraph is saying if we get a diluted sample, we're going to consider that positive. And then the next part in the next paragraph says, but we're going to allow you to undergo a physical examination to see if that was not your fault. And then we're going to retest. And if that's positive,
or even if in our determination of that previous diluted sample, we have reason to believe or proof that the sample was altered intentionally, that shall be considered a positive and grounds for discipline.
Yeah, I understand now that we've talked it out. That would be pretty difficult for a licensee to understand.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
This is also something that, you know, when a licensee is on probation and is run through a drug rehabilitation program, there are additional information provided to them outside of just this particular language. So as part of Maximus program, they're well educated into what biological fluid testing is and what it's going to include and how they can go about, you know, getting in trouble as a result.
Okay. So board members, any other suggested language change edits? Any other comments on this language? And if not, and you're fine with it, I entertain a motion, please.
This is Daniel Drummer. I have one question about the section optional language that's at the bottom of that page.
Yes.
And so this is for discussion at this point, right?
Correct.
Okay. I would be opposed to adding citing the probation monitor or its designee. This still falls to the board's responsibility, and the probation monitor is our arm in this matter. But I would not want to. I don't think I would want to specifically declare the probation monitor designee in language like this. It seems to remove the responsibility from the board by including it.
Yeah. So it's I think I understand the concern, but the optional language would be used in stipulated settlements that would come before the board for adoption, and would be as a result of part of the negotiation. The example would be a case that's kind of on that fine line of being considered an isolated instance. And as part of negotiation, we could say, because the clinical diagnostic evaluation falls under the disciplinary order, if the disciplinary order, or if the clinical diagnostic evaluation comes back and the licensee is identified as not being a substance abusing licensee, at that point, this language, the biological fluid testing requirement could be waived. And we would only use that optional language in those circumstances where it's the least egregious of cases. And again, only in stipulation, and those stipulated agreements would come before the board for adoption. So it's a tool that we're able to use, and we do use currently. You've seen it in stipulations that have come before you. We're just now editing the guidelines to be consistent with actions that have been happening.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I fully agree that the condition may be waived. I mean, in what we've been doing by the board upon a written finding of the CDE. I have that's what we've been doing, and that I fully agree with. I'm concerned about naming the probation monitor designee into the regulation, though, because that person is still the board acting on the board's behalf.
Right, and it would be considered a delegated authority. If you don't include that language, and we use that optional language, when the clinical diagnostic evaluation came back and identified the licensee as not a substance abusing licensee, without that board or its designee delegation, that action would actually have to come back before you as board members for you to consider it as almost a modification to the original disciplinary order. And there's really not a vehicle for that without it.
Right. I mean, and that's how things have been operating. That the optional language of just like you said, adding this into STIPs, for example, has been included. That the condition may be waived by the boards.
Right.
By the board upon a written finding. Right. That's how we've been operating, and the probation monitor, as on behalf of the board, has been doing that, I believe. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm not sure why we need to add it.
I think, for clarity's sake, so that it's not confusing to attorneys, that would have to return back to the board in a hearing for a petition of change that based on that stipulated agreement. And it's a matter of sequence that I think that creates the problem. So when we use the optional language and the board adopts that stipulated agreement with the optional language in it, it really is board staff, right? It really is a delegated authority at that point that based on that finding of the CDE, we will waive it and enforce it that way. Without it, it's not as clear, because when you're adopting it as board members, your respondent actually hasn't had their clinical diagnostic evaluation at that point yet. It comes subsequent to your adoption.
Right.
Dr. Drummer, this is Michael Kanotes. Just to add in one piece, perhaps perspective that we lawyers have. If I was a lawyer on the other side, I'd want to know exactly who would be telling me that having it named in the stipulation, I think is helpful, because then the client knows precisely who will give him or her the waiver or the modification.
Okay.
And Dr. Zimmer, I understand it almost seems unnecessary in perspective, but I think that's it, right? It's the audience that we're actually catering to and the clarity for their mind's eye, that this wouldn't necessitate a whole nother hearing process for that to be done, that, contingent upon that clinical diagnostic evaluation, should it come back that they're not a substance abusing licensee, we can make that determination without actually returning back to the board and creating a further delay for the respondent.
Right. And I'm not looking to strike the optional language as a whole, because we have been doing this, and I think that it's an appropriate thing. If the CDE determines the person that the respondent is not abusing, then I totally agree with them not having to continue with biologic testing. according to the program. There have been occasions when the board has kept biologic testing in as a separate condition, I believe, and wanted to continue that in some cases in the past. My concern was just about adding the words probation monitor or designee.
Well, and so the other element of it that I would give for board consideration is it's a may, right? Even though the language is there based on the CDE, we may remove the condition. While the CDE might come back saying that they're not a substance abusing licensee, there may actually be information contained in the CDE that would cause the board probation monitor or its designee to still not want to remove that language.
Right, I understand that.
Consistent with the 1441 standards, even when discipline involves drug or alcohol, the 1441 standards would still say that bodily fluid testing should still be used, just at a lower frequency. And in this circumstance, we would just be applying one further step of discretion in saying that we could remove it altogether. But in certain circumstances, based on the clinical diagnostic evaluation, even though they were identified not being a candidate for the program or not being a substance abusing licensee, based on the information in the CDE, we would still want to impose the minimum amount of bodily fluid testing from that point.
Right. Again, I have no problem with what the language does, because we've essentially been using this. The addition, the underlying piece is what I believe is being added. And that's just where my concern lies. But as Mr. Connotes identified, clarity for parties, for the respondent's party, I think helps me to get to leaving the underlying portion in.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Drummer. Any other board comment on any of this section, including Dr. Drummer? Any other suggestions?
Madam President, this is Jesus. Thank you. I hate to pull us back into the paragraph above, but in the pink and yellow, a positive result in this case is one which is based on scientific principles. If we're going to go there, I suggest we consider excluding, right? That's what this is doing, is excluding any underlying physical, and make the assertion that the respondent likely tampered with the sample in order to sway the test results. So the scientific principle doesn't itself confirm that the respondent attempted to alter it. It confirms that you've gone through the process of excluding these potential underlying physical conditions. So does that make sense? So that you can then assert that there was some tampering going on. Just a thought.
I think I understand the thought. The only insertion here essentially is kind of going back to what the language was previously stated, with the insertion of the words in this case. And again, it's cut and paste from the 1441 standards. So
understood, Jason. Yep.
I think it still works. And just for kind of uniformity's sake, I'm okay with paraphrasing it to make it simpler. But I think here it may not be necessary.
This is Clay, if I might. After hearing the discussion in that paragraph, if a positive result is obtained, and then the new language that's highlighted in pink, in order to get rid of any issues on clarity, what would the board think if you just made if it is determined respondent, that language in pink was just made into a new paragraph? So you'd have a paragraph talking about the result and how it was obtained, and then you're talking about the determination that will be made and what will happen based on that determination as a separate paragraph. Just to make it clearer.
Yeah. Yeah, it does separate it.
This is Daniel Drummer. I appreciate the separation of thought with that action.
And board staff has no issue with that at all. We can make that separation just for clarity. So the separation would start a new paragraph with a positive result in this case, and then a third paragraph that would start with the sentence that starts, if it is determined the respondent altered the test results.
Actually, I was suggesting just the if it is determined to be the new paragraph, so that if a positive result is with the prior positive result, and then the new thought would be, what does the board do once that result's obtained? A hard
So
return at the end.
Just a paragraph break with the insertion of the pink language.
Correct.
Okay. Is that the understanding of the members?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
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 Okay. So at this point, I will entertain a motion.
This is Daniel Drummer. I move to approve the proposed regulatory text with edits for Title 16 CCR Section 1399.15 and direct staff to submit the text to the Director of Consumer Affairs and Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to amend the preceding rulemaking package, initiate a revised rulemaking process, make any non-substantive technical or grammatical changes to the package, and set the matter for hearing if requested.
Thank you, Dr. Drummer. Do we have a second?
Tanya McMillan, seconds.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Any further board discussion? Moderator, will you please facilitate public comment?
Thank you, Madam President. This is a moderator, and I will now open up the Q&A panel. If you would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference.
Yes, please, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So can we please have a roll call vote?
Alicia Rabena-Amen.
Aye.
Katerina Ellaby.
Aye.
Jesus Dominguez.
Aye.
Daniel Drummer.
Aye.
Tanya McMillan.
Aye.
5-0, motion carries.
Thank you. And about 10 minutes away from noon, what I would suggest is breaking for lunch and coming back right at 12:30. So, board members, you okay with that?
I am.
That sounds good.
Okay, let's come back at 12:30 and we'll pick up with agenda item number 8, the board member training. Thank you.